Hi, welcome to Remax Bowler Video Podcast. Today we have Terry Vratny with us, who has been with Fidelity Title for many years, and I've known Terry for quite some time, and I've been at this, I think, like close to 38 years, but Terry's been in the business a little bit longer. So how many years have you been in the title business, Terry?
44, believe it or not.
44. I cannot think of a more esteemed guest to have to come talk about title insurance, because one of the things when I'm out on a listing appointment, one of the things on the net sheet or expenses on the net sheet is title insurance, and it can be a fairly big number. So a lot of my clients ask, what the heck is title insurance? So Terry's got lots of experience, so I can't think of a better person to ask that question to kick this off. What is title insurance when it comes to real estate?
Well, and a real simplistic answer, I guess, title insurance determines the rights and ownership of a piece of property. And then it can assure the buyer and the lender of their right to own, to enjoy the property and to not have any problems come up after they have been in there.
Okay, and now I think for most people it's pretty easy to understand, like car insurance, you crash and then the insurance company covers your liability and such. How is title insurance different from like car insurance, fire insurance, where there's a definite accident or casualty happen that you can't picture that happening in what title insurance is? So how's it different?
Yeah, you're right, that's a good question. It is much different. Title insurance actually covers against issues that might have happened in the past, whereas your health insurance is insuring against you becoming ill this afternoon or next week, and there's a risk in that. But there's also a risk in real estate that something might have happened in the past that could affect the owner's right to enjoy the property.
Okay, so as far as how it's different, again, the premium, you just pay it once, right? You don't make monthly payments in the future then?
That's right, that's right. Two things the other thing, that besides insuring the past, the other thing that makes title insurance different is that you only pay it one time. Usually at the time the property is purchased, there are two policies possibly issued, one for the owner and one for their mortgage lender. And the owner's policy is actually good for as long as they own that property or their heirs own it. So it could go on for 50 years for the price you paid at closing. The lender's policy ends when the loan goes away, so if the loan is paid off, then that's gone.
So that is pretty interesting when you think about that. All the other types of insurances are insuring future happenings.
Right.
Where everything in title insurance is some event that happened in the past that could cause a loss for the new owner.
Correct. And the past could be anything up to the minute of closing.
Right. Okay, sounds good. So how do title companies do their work?
In Colorado, title companies have two distinct functions. One of them is the most obvious, which is the closing of the transaction when the property is purchased or a refinance is done. But the other thing that's not quite so visible, but I believe more important, is the actual insurance. So what we really sell is insurance, and we do the closing as kind of a ancillary to the insurance to make it, reduces the risk on the insurance part of it if we handle it.
Right, because you're involved in it, you know what's going on, and make sure everything happens at the closing table, so there's no claims to title that occurred at your table.
That's right, that's right. So what we do to figure out what the risks might be in the past is we research the property itself, and we can go all the way back to when the government first granted the patent on the ground.
That's a long ways back.
Yeah, luckily we don't have to go back that far very often, but for instance, in a subdivision, we only need to go back as far as the plat. Or if we had done other work on that property earlier, a particular title company had done work on a specific piece of property, we may only go back to our last research. So the work can be really long and arduous, or it can be pretty simple and quick.
Okay, well, we've both been at this a long time, and I think of how research has changed for my job, like the old microfiche and stuff. Just real quickly, your research point of view, how, and you're over 40 years in the business, that has to have changed a lot.
Oh, very much.
I mean, it may have been, I don't know what they did before microfiche, but paper. Well, how's that changed? Is it easier now or harder as far as the research goes?
Back in the olden days, all the title companies were clustered around the courthouse. We were all right here.
Right, the courthouse is right there across the street from us right now.
So we all used to run back and forth across the street and actually go into the clerk and recorder's office and do the research, what got recorded, when, and it was all manually done. We also had these big leather-bound books that weighed more than me, and could look up all the handwritten transfers of property from the beginning of time, in the
Wow.
late 1800s.
That must have been interesting.
So, of course, now, a lot of it is electronic, and we rarely even go to the clerk and recorder's office. We don't even have to record. We don't even take documents to their
Right, it's
person.
all done electronically.
Yeah, we
Wow.
do that electronically as well. So it's changed a lot. So now my office is like miles away from the courthouse. But it's much easier in some ways, but harder in others because you have to do a lot more on the computer. It's a little harder on your, you know, in some situations.
Okay, well, next on your list was about researching the sellers and buyers with the state and courts to find personal judgments that might affect the property, right? How
That's
does
right,
that work?
that's right. So things that are recorded against the property we find when we do the research on the real estate itself. But a seller or a buyer might have a personal lien, like for instance, they didn't pay their IRS taxes.
Sounds like a problem.
That can be a real big, many thousands of dollars problem.
Right.
But that lien is actually against the person, but as soon as they attach to a piece of real estate, as soon as they own real estate, then that lien actually takes priority over all other liens. So the federal government will get theirs first, of course. So that kind of lien we find by searching the names of people, and then also judgments. So if you had been sued by somebody, whether it's a tiny one like $600 or it could be a lot more, that's a personal lien, but it will affect the real estate.
What's a typical delay like when it turns up, when you weren't expecting like an IRS judgment or something like that, like you just mentioned? Is that something you just call up the IRS, ask for a payoff like you do a mortgage loan and pay it off, or is it much more complicated than that?
No, that's pretty much it, but they usually require that the owner themselves make the contact. And sometimes it takes a while longer to get that information back, so it might be a few weeks. Some lenders are that slow as well, but we often can get them instantly when we make a phone call.
So as a listing agent, it might be, how would you, as a listing agent, prevent that from causing a delay at closing, like maybe a to-be-determined title commitment or something, so you could find out if the seller had something against the property that they kind of forgot about that IRS lien?
And they do tend to forget sometimes, don't they? Well, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but we also check the buyer. And at the
Okay.
time you get the listing, you don't know who the buyer
Right.
is.
So-
But a buyer's lien will also, a buyer's judgment or IRS lien will also attach to the property before their new loan.
Okay,
So there really isn't a good way ahead of time to prevent that.
on the buying side.
On the buying side,
right?
and I would hope you'd ask your seller if they have anything like
Right.
that, and tell them it will show up, and
Right.
hopefully they'll come clean at
Right.
the time.
Now, is that type of thing on the buyer side, does that show up on a credit report ever, if somebody had an IRS lien?
It probably would,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I believe it would. I'm actually not 100% sure
Yeah.
of that though.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting, all right, next on your list there?
Well, after we've done all that research, we look at the property, we looked at the seller and the buyer, and gather info from the new lender if there is one.
Uh-huh.
I know you have cash transactions now and then,
A
but.
few more than we used to,
Yeah,
actually.
that's right. Well, then we actually issue what's called a title insurance commitment, which is the title company's commitment that they will issue a policy upon certain things happening. So that in that commitment are requirements that must be met, like paying off an IRS lien or an existing mortgage and a second mortgage and things like that. And then we also list on the commitment the things that are not necessarily problematic, but they're disclosed, like easements on the property and access and that sort of thing, and how the property is affected by homeowners associations
Okay.
and covenants.
So to compare it again to the other types of insurance, the commitment is almost like a fire insurance binder or that type of thing. It's a
Yes.
promise to insure if those items that you just mentioned
That's
are
right.
covered.
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
All right,
And then the other part of the transaction that I mentioned earlier is the closing itself of the transaction. And this is, Colorado is not an escrow state, so most title companies actually do both functions. We do the title research and we do the closing too. So there's a whole different team of experts in our office who handle that. And they coordinate with the lender, the realtors, the attorneys, and all the parties to the transaction to establish a date and time and put all the documents together that will be signed in order to transfer.
okay.